All right, science time. Today we're talking about common ancestry. Common ancestry. Last time we talked about one, I would say, one broad idea of evidence for the statement that biological organisms change over time, and that was that that we can see that change. That there is not just kind of a loose idea of organisms changing, but we have actual evidence for it. Things like that the complexity of life has changed in general over time. The oldest fossils we see are also the simplest, and the newer fossils are more complex. And now we're talking about the idea that one of the reasons that we see this increasing complexity of life is that organisms share a common ancestry. So write down common ancestry. We've talked about this word before. Oh, let me change this to. We've talked about this word before. Oh, the camera needs to be adjusted just a hair. Boop. That'll work. Okay. Here's the primary word we're working on. Evolution. Remember, I think I have at least once, probably twice, commented on how there's some difficulty associated with this world in the maybe philosophically. Scientifically, there isn't. Scientifically, that when I say scientifically, I mean the accumulation of evidence with the idea of supporting a hypothesis such that it becomes a theory. There really isn't any consternation. There's not a difficulty with that from a scientific standpoint. But from a philosophical one, people do sometimes have a problem with this. And so we came up with this definition that it's changes. I think in the last video I said changes in allelic frequency, but in order to simplify things for your little 8th grade minds, we'll put changes in biology over time. Using this definition, we can demonstrate in a laboratory that this is true. If we use this pretty broad and maybe oversimplified definition of evolution, we can show that that is true in a laboratory. We can take a petri dish and have a certain kind of microorganism in it, and have 2 or 3 of those petri dishes that are separate and administer different environments to each of them, and they will change different from each other over time. What was 3 petri dishes of microorganisms, of the same microorganism X, over time becomes, this one could be X prime or X1. This one could be X2. They're different. When we look at them, even within human time frames, there's an experiment where this is ongoing. I think the microorganism used in the experiment is E. coli, but there's an experiment where a person or a group of people at a university has taken multiple samples of that microorganism, and I don't even think in that case they did change anything about the environment. The environment is the same for all of them, but then 40 or 50 or 60, I forget how long it's been going on, years later, they're all completely different. One of them has evolved, if I remember correctly, to be a different color. One of them they all start out as this kind of like white color of microorganism that just grow in a petri dish, and one of them has evolved to be pink or something like that. One of them has evolved to glow in the dark, if I remember correctly. Just the fact that time has progressed and that they've been separated caused what we call evolution, caused change in biology over time. So it can be shown in a laboratory. Where people have a problem with it is the scale of the changes. It's not a problem of type that we can see this in the laboratory. It's a problem of scale. That, sure, it's all good that E. coli can be like this and then it turns pink, but was what something like E. coli, a single-celled organism, one of our ancestors, where we are, the main problem is that we tend to think of ourselves as like the best. Look at me. I'm a great, beautiful, complicated human being. There's no way my great 10 to the 40th times great grandparent was a single-celled organism. Those guys are stupid. Right? Or to put a finer point on it, there's no way my great 10 to the 3rd grandparent was a chimpanzee. Those guys are stupid. And as we've said before, it's not this linear progression where let's now, instead of my E. coli samples, let's take, this is going to be a chimp, Nice. This is what chimps look like to me. This is going to be a chimp. It's not this. Because if that were the case, as is commonly stated by opponents of evolution, where'd the chimp go? They're still chimps, so it can't be like this. What it actually is this branching structure here, where this is still a chimp. But at some point, some population of chimps branched off, and those eventually became human beings. Another population broke off, and those eventually became, I don't know, bonobos or something, with a slightly different head shape. But the point is that this is a branching system. It's not one thing leading to another. And a way that I usually like to demonstrate this is that one of the, maybe even as an analogy we can have for that, is that, let's draw a very similar diagram, but this one is your mom. And this one is you. So for obvious reasons, your mom did not turn into you, right? Your mom's still there, or I don't know in your life. This is just an example. Your mom did not turn into you. That's not how the process of childbirth works. It'd be spooky if it was. It isn't that your mom turned into you. It's that your mom still exists. This is still your mom, but now she, at one point, gave birth to little old you, and then later on, your sister. Hey, by the way, in this very rough diagram, what is the what's the x-axis? This is what? As this moves left to right, what is happening? Time. Time is passing. Time is passing. How do we know time passes? That's a really philosophical question. But we can tell, like, in so much as we can see that time passes at all, we see biological change. We see it on the very microscopic level. We see it in families. Are you the same as your mom? No. Is your sister the same as you? No. But you're both related through the common ancestor of your mom. Once again, are you a chimpanzee? No. Are you and bonobos both? What was the thing I said? Are you and bonobos the same? No. But you're both related through the common ancestor of something isn't a chimpanzee, but something like a chimpanzee. Right? Does that kind of make sense? So you see the analogy between these two things. No one disagrees with this. This would be a ludicrous thing to disagree with, the purple one. No. The purple one is that you are not your mom, but your mom gave birth to you. Trey does not disagree with that his mom gave birth to him. Maybe just a fighter. But this one is problematic for people because it says something that people don't want to hear, which is that human beings are animals. That human beings are developed from the same stuff as other animals. At least that's my take on it. I'm not saying that evolution is my take on it. This is the accepted idea by every scientist who studies this kind of thing worldwide. My take on it is that it doesn't have to be. The root problem is that people don't like to think of themselves as animals. That's my opinion. So what evidence is there in real life for this common ancestry? This idea that, mainly, again, our two-pronged approach. Fossils that tell us about the way things were in the past, but we can't see them wiggle around and move and stuff. So we compare that to today's animals, or organisms. I shouldn't say animals. It's more than just animals. But we compare them to today's animals. We have this two-pronged approach where we use fossils as a proxy for living things, and living things as a fossil for extinct things. Living things as a proxy for extinct things. Your book has this pretty nice diagram with much better pictures than I have, explaining what I was trying to show you a second ago, where, oops, I'm doing a bad job of getting that shown. Get there.
Up is down now.
I know, up is down and down is left, and left is up and right is over. So what we see in this picture here, you can, I guess if you're watching this on YouTube, you can go back and pause it over that video. But what we see here is that this common ancestor, can you all pull this up on your explorations too? Your common ancestor, the Anthracotherium, this fossil discovered, is related to all of these things: Indohyus, Pakicetus, Amblocetus, Cuchacetus, Rhodocetus, Durodon, the toothed whales, the baleen whales, and eventually the hippopotamus. How do you think they constructed this tree of life? We see the branches in it. We see that Anthracotherium is not hippopotamus. But how do you think they constructed this? Based on what evidence? Fossils. It looks like specifically what fossil evidence did they use? What part of the organism's body did they use as fossil evidence? Yeah, the skull. It looks like they took the skulls and they made the very safe assumption, kind of like you and your sister again, that closely related organisms share similar features. Do you guys know Tristan's brother, Raven? Yeah. They're similar. Are they the exact same human being? No, obviously not. Do they look the exact same? No. But Raven and Tristan look more similar than Raven and anyone else in this room, or Tristan and anyone else in this room. Have you met Cameron's dad, J.R. Wasserberger? Yeah, you've probably met him. Cameron and his dad are not the same person, as we already discussed. They don't even look the same, but Cameron looks more like JR than any of the rest of us do, and JR looks more like Cameron. Are there exceptions to that? Of course. You could tell me something like, oh, but my aunt doesn't look anything like me. She's got no arms, and she has only one hair on the top of her head. One of her eyes is blue, and the other one's green. Sure, there are exceptions. There are exceptions in the science of evolution to this, too, where some organisms that are not closely related happen to look like each other. Think about snakes and worms, perhaps. Not very closely related, but they share some similar attributes. Yep, that's what we're looking at. So generally, closely related organisms share similar features. That's one piece of evidence that we use. How can we tell that for past organisms? Very simply, again, the piece of evidence we primarily use for that is fossils. Right, very good. You can also kind of see as time moves on here on this chart, again, the x-axis there is time in millions of years. Do you notice that there are some things on here that we may be surprised that they share similar features? So what's the very bottom of that chart? Baleen whales. And the top of the chart we have is in today's organisms, the hippopotamus. A baleen whale is not really just like a hippopotamus. You can see that a baleen whale is not just like a hippopotamus. But the yellow line there represents modern organisms. You see where it says present day? Is everyone looking at it still? See where it says present day? What are the only three modern organisms on this chart? You see there, the top one? Hippopotamus. What other ones intersect the line of present day? Toothed whales and baleen whales. So we have all these other things in the middle. Indohyus, Pakicetus, Amblocetus, Cuchacetus, and Rhodocetus that are extinct. What do those represent? Remember, it was one of our vocab words in the last lesson. Those things are called what kind of fossils?
Dead fossils.
No, okay, they are dead fossils. We don't normally call them that because that's implied by the word fossil. They don't exist anymore. Those organisms don't exist anymore. No, they are extinct, but they show us the link between the modern hippopotamus and the modern toothed and baleen whales. What kind of fossils do we call those? Transitional fossils. You probably should have known that. Transitional fossils. Kind of like that Tiktaalik. Remember Tiktaalik from the video? That represents a transitional fossil between the whole group of fishes and the whole group of amphibians. So we know, again, no one argues with this. This is, no, not even Trey. This is present day. These are fishes, and this is amphibians. That's a pretty good little outline of a frog, if I do say so myself. No one argues with the existence of these two organisms. Why? Why does no one argue with this? Yeah, you can catch both of these things. You can catch both of these things. Now, as I'm drawing things in this direction, what does this represent? Yeah, back in time. So there are other organisms. These two things have a common ancestor. In fact, I should probably draw it more like this. These two things have a common ancestor with this something like Tiktaalik. Oh man, this is going to represent Tiktaalik. That's Tiktaalik. And this is overly simplified. Tiktaalik. Oh man, I can't remember if it's two A's or two I's. I think it's two A's. Tiktaalik. Let me draw it like this instead. There we go. That's what I wanted. So maybe this Tiktaalik represents something on the way. It may not be the actual most recent common ancestor between fishes and amphibians, but it represents something on the way close to the most recent common ancestor. This MRCA, most recent common ancestor. Another way that we tell the age of a most recent common ancestor. Remember, we had there are ways that we can tell using the rocks that we find these fossils in. Maybe we find a Tiktaalik in a rock that's I think let's say it's 360 million years old. Is that right? 350 million years old. We'll say we find the fossil of Tiktaalik in a rock that is 350 million years old. Don't quote me on that. But we say we find that rock, and we date the rock. How do we date rocks? Do you remember? We use what kind of stuff? No. Don't do that anymore. Let's pay attention. Radioactive dating. Do you remember that? We talked about it probably like a month ago, but we talked about radiometric dating, how we can actually look at the radioactive isotopes in a rock, and that tells us how old the rock is. So let's say we use that, and we find that this Tiktaalik fossil is 350 million years old. We also have this way of dating the life itself called mitochondrial DNA, that we can say that this lineage of the fishes broke off from this lineage of the amphibians. By looking at the DNA of both of them, we can say that that separated, the lineage separated, they diverged, they branched away from each other, maybe it says 380 million years ago. So we have this fossil Tiktaalik that we can date to 350 million years old. We have the mitochondrial DNA that can tell us that they diverged 380 million years old. Those are two completely separate pieces of data that have nothing to do with each other, but they both say the same thing, right? You see how that's excellent evidence? That's like when you rob a gas station and they have, like when you, Joe, rob a gas station and the clerk says, a little squat guy with glasses robbed the gas station, and the person you sold the stuff you robbed from the gas station said, yeah, a little squat guy with glasses sold this to me. They're not related. Those two pieces of evidence are not related, but they say the same thing, and so the police know you stole the stuff from the gas station, Joe, right? Same thing here. The two pieces of evidence are not themselves related, but they both say the same thing, and so we have a very good idea that Tiktaalik is a lineage that is related to both fish and amphibians, and that it must be somewhere between 400 and 350 million years ago. Another piece of evidence we have for common ancestry is what you did your lab on, and this is what you did also your bell work on, and this is also, I think it's the objective. Let me write the objective down. Argue from evidence regarding common ancestry. Let me write that down. So we have a couple pieces of evidence so far. We have the similarities in appearance of things like fossils and actual organisms. We have the, oh no, how did that happen? We have the fossil evidence itself. We have the dated absolute age dating of rocks. Argue, oops, still a little wet. Argue from evidence regarding common ancestry. What other piece of evidence do we have that you found in your lab? I hope that you found in your lab. Bone structure. Tell me what you said about bone structure, Mason. You guys are writing down the stuff from the discussion too, right? Okay. And you're writing down the stuff that I say? Are you?
Yeah.
What did you write, Mason?
Right now I have, for that discussion of common ancestry.
No. I mean for your bell work. What is your...
So, the similarities are that we have the same bone structure or setup, and the differences are size and length.
Yeah. So is it the exact same structure? Let's say, give me an example that you guys did in your lab.
Cow.
Just give me one. Just give me one.
Cow.
Just give me one.
Cow.
Cow. Good. This is going to be a wild guess, but let's say we're drawing the forelimbs of these animals. Okay. These are all vertebrates. They're all tetrapods. This is going to be the humerus. I'm going to do my humerus in orange, ulna and radius in purple. Oh, golly. Yeah, I'm good at it. And then this is for the cow. We're going to do carpals in blue, metacarpals in pink, and phalanges in red. And then the cow also has a hoof that grows. It's a modified. We say the word modified when we're talking about evolutionary biology, which means that the structure has been changed, but it has a hoof that's modified to go around its phalanges. And this is don't quote me on this. My forte is not comparative anatomy of bovine creatures, but we'll say this is the cow. Okay. Do an outline for the whole thing. No, we're not. No, remember, so snake, we did see that the snake has homologous structures in the hind limbs. What does that tell us about its evolution? The snake doesn't use those hind limbs now. Yeah, it probably evolved from an organism that did have 4 legs and used them. And for some reason, it was advantageous for that organism to over the course of time, for its offsprings got more advantage out of not having those limbs. The snake does still do a pretty good job of moving around. And what are some other advantages the snake might incur from not having limbs?
Being able to go through little things.
Yeah, it can be able to go through little things. Its limbs don't get in the way of it being able to go through things like holes. Like if it's chasing after a vole, and the vole has dug a hole, and the snake can go into the vole's hole and eat the vole. That sounds kind of like Dr. Seuss. Okay, give me another. What was it? What was an example from an organism from your lab?
Dog.
What did you have? Another different one? Lizard. Let's do lizard. Let's say it has. Again, we will see this long bone towards its body, proximal to its body. We'll have these shorter bones distal to that. A group of small, interconnected with cartilage bones distal to that. Some slightly longer, and usually 5 of them distal to that. And then maybe this one has quite long phalanges. So it's not with some claws. So it's not just a coincidence that we call them still phalanges, these bones phalanges on a lizard, for instance. Are they the exact same? Again, no. But is it safe for us to call this a humerus and this a humerus? Yeah, it's not just made up. It's not just wordplay. They really are the same kind of bone with the same, roughly the same function, roughly the same form, but they're homologous. We use the word homologous. These are homologous structures. What's a homologue?
No idea.
Have you ever heard of words being homologous? I think homologous words are ones that sound the same, that you spell different. A homophone, that's what that is, a homophone. Like right and right. Like right and right. Those words sound the same, homophone. Yeah, but they're spelled different. So homologous structures means that these have a similar, that's what homo means, that the structures are homologous, that they are like the same. What was the example you guys had?
Snake.
No, let's use one that isn't snake, because we just talked about snake.
Okay.
Frogs. Did someone do bat? Sure you did. Or eagle. I bet someone did eagle. There you go.
Shark.
Or you and Tristan.
Tristan and I. I did that. Yep. Each your brand on that. I literally didn't even say
I So maybe, I don't know, these are all, they have similar structures. Another piece of evidence from to common ancestry is that when we see organisms develop, when we see in an ultrasound a human baby develop, it goes through the stages almost like a homologue of evolution itself. That the very, very, very most basic thing when the baby is first conceived, what does it look like? Well, it's what happens when a baby is conceived. Does it though, Aiden? When a baby is conceived? No, it's not. No, what is it? At the very moment of conception, the baby is 2 cells, and what are those cells called? The what from the mommy and the what from the daddy? The sperm and the egg. Okay, so it's 2 cells, and they come together to make what I think is called a zygote, and that is just a single-celled organism at that time. Just like the most basic organisms on planet Earth were single-celled organisms. And then that grows and divides through mitosis to make a little colony of single cells. It's not itself a colony. This is now an organism, and it's got a little sphere. It's almost like those stromatolites that we saw that are really single-celled organisms working together. And then eventually it starts to differentiate into different structures. It starts to get literally gills, and its little arms look like fins, and it has a tail, and it looks really quite like a fish. And from that, it grows stronger arms like an amphibian, and from that, it grows, it really goes through the progression of our ancestry on planet Earth. And all of that happens inside the womb in a baby. We call that embryology. That the fact that those things, that the baby itself, you yourself, didn't evolve, but you did this like proxy of evolution where you went through the stages of what human beings had gone through in their evolutionary journey, as demonstrated on this. You can see these little different, basically at some point in your own personal development, you had gills. You had no use for gills, but you had gills. Did you like I just said, you didn't use them, you didn't need them. Why would you have had gills? Well, it's because at that time, your when you were like that in your mom's tummy, your genetic makeup was like that of a fish. And it's not a coincidence. It's because at some point in your ancient history, your ancestors were fish.
My uncle increased the least.
I don't know. I hope the mic picked that up. This is the first time I've used this mic for review, but in case it didn't, I'm going to tell your joke, Mason. He said that his uncle decreased the least from a fish. That your uncle's still very fish-like. Is that correct? Yeah, that's great. So some of us have evolved more than others. No, that's not true. That's not true. I think, so once again, the evidence we have for common ancestry is those things: embryology, homologous structures, fossil evidence, and the absolute age dating that we do with the rocks they're found in. And I guess the genetic evidence too. Basically, it's really, it more or less absolutely confirms the idea of evolution that since the 1850s, we've been talking about this idea. And then in the 1980s, someone came up with a way to look at the actual genetic structure of an organism, and it confirmed all of that. It could have said anything, but what it said was the stuff that we had already been thinking about, even without the direct evidence of genetics. You have questions about any of this? I know this can be a point of consternation for people, but one thing that I always like to say is that I'm not asking you to, as it were, believe this. I'm presenting the evidence to you and making some remarks about the way it could be concluded. But if this is not something that you find that you quote unquote believe, fine. But take this evidence, take the evidence that your parents or your pastor presents you, and make up your own thought process about it. Bye.